Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. I'm Andeea, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissmann, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. Welcome to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. Our guest today is Meredith Oke. She is the executive director of the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, which provides health education grounded in cutting-edge research that would otherwise take decades to reach the public. She is also an executive coach and host of the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. The QBC podcast connects practitioners, coaches, researchers, and everyday people who have gone down the rabbit hole of quantum biology, the new field of science that is proving that the woo is real. Meredith also offers private and group coaching for women looking to reach the next level in their lives and work. Now, we are really excited to have Meredith here today as our first guest because this quantum matchmaker is how Laura and I met, and she has brought so many others together as well. During this episode, Meredith breaks down the field of quantum biology and how it came to be. And she also shares, for the first time, a very big announcement for the future of the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology. So let's dive into the episode. Enjoy. With that, I am going to start, Meredith, by just welcome and thank you so much for being here on our podcast today. I want you to start. We would love if you would start with just how has quantum biology field came to be? Let's just start there. Where'd this come from?
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, for having me here. I'm thrilled beyond measure that you're starting a podcast. And I love seeing everybody, follow their zone of genius into the world. So good for you guys. So quantum biology is, I just want to preface this by saying, I am by no means an expert in this area. Okay. I'm like a person who was forced to start to try to understand this because I needed it for my health. And in that process, I learned a lot and I found people who are true experts. I am not. However, that makes me a really good person to explain it to everybody else. So quantum biology, the way that we're talking about it, really came to be coined, I would say, by the book, The Coming Age of Quantum Biology by Jim Al-Khalili and John Joe McFadden. And John Joe McFadden was a biologist and Jim Al-Khalili was a quantum physicist. And they met somehow, I think at a conference or something, and they started to talk. And in the world of academia, everything is very siloed and very structured. And you do not speak to scientists who work in a different field than you. You stay in your zone. Mm-hmm. You stay in your lane completely. And these two started to talk and they were like, what if we tried to solve each other's problems? What if we used the science? We used each other's science to see if there's any connections that could answer questions that we can't answer just by staying in our own lane. So I think they took a big risk doing it and they were a little bit concerned about getting ridiculed within the academic field because that's really not something that people do very often, but they did it. And they started to find really, really interesting results. And they were able to give extremely strong evidence that living systems, biological systems, have quantum effects taking place. And so when we talk about quantum, and Carrie Bennett's really good at explaining this, right? We're really just, what we're saying is we're looking at the smallest level of health. We're not just going to a chemical level. We're going to a subatomic level and looking at how biology functions from that perspective. And that is a relatively new field for people to look at it like that. And so there's a lot of pure academic work looking at quantum biology, but what I was interested in and what the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology is interested in is okay, so if this is true, what does that mean practically? What does that mean for people in their everyday lives? What are some things that are really important to our health that we haven't been thinking about because we weren't thinking about health from that smallest level? And so we weren't thinking about how our bodies are interacting with our environments on a frequency level. And I think that's the door that quantum biology opens up really, really wide.
Yeah. Now, how do paradigm shifts, how do these things even happen? What's going on right now with this?
So the quote on paradigm shifts is that they happen one funeral at a time. I think it was Max Planck who said that, right? And the insight there being that people tend not to change their minds once they've become established in their fields. They just eventually die, and people with new ideas. So there's that. But what if a paradigm shift does happen, it tends to be it tends to happen because science or a scientist or an observer of some type is presented with evidence that doesn't fit their current framework of thinking, right? Like it doesn't make sense. So the first time it happens, and you would call that an anomaly, right? Like how many times have we heard, oh, no, it's just an anomaly. And it's like, well, no, that's something that can't be explained by your formula or your paradigm. So an anomaly comes up and it gets pushed to the side, but then another one, and then another one. And eventually the pile of anomalies gets so big that it's like, we need a different container. And
It's almost
so,
like anecdotal, like you'll hear anecdotal evidence. And after a while, it's like, well, maybe we should pay attention to this anecdotal evidence. Maybe there's no
yes,
study, published study on it, but maybe we should start looking at that. And yeah,
exactly. And just because we can't explain it doesn't mean it's an anomaly, right? Like that we tend to be like, oh, well, that can't be true because I don't have an explanation for it. And yet it's still happening. So the paradigm is like the container, right? Because we do need a framework, like to think of like a bookshelf, right? If you just
Okay.
walked in and there was just like hundreds of books scattered all over the place, it's like, no, if they're on a shelf and they're in an order and you understand how to find things. And so that's to me like what a framework does with knowledge. It gives you a way to think about it so that you can access the knowledge so that it becomes useful.
You
Yeah,
had me,
thank you.
you had me diving in just quickly to my presentation that I graduated with to find that quote by Einstein. Just brought it up that no problem can be solved from the same level of consciousness that created it.
Mhm.
That just comes to mind with this, getting to a paradigm shift.
Because it does in some ways. I mean, you could say paradigm shift, or you could probably say consciousness shift. Like it's, I think you could argue those two things are very similar, right? It's like we have to reimagine how we see the world from a
Right.
different place.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to get more to your role in all of this, Meredith, but I think Andeea and I both feel strongly that obviously we've invited you to be our first guest. It's just, for us a huge honor that you said yes. But we feel like you've played a massive role in this paradigm shift, but also forming a new collective consciousness on healing and circadian rhythm and bringing a lot of these almost nerdy scientists, physicists, and yeah, light doctors, and bringing them together and bringing out their voices and connecting. And you've had a huge role, Meredith, so thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Agreed. Well said, Laura.
Thank you. Thanks for saying that. I really appreciate it. And to
Oh,
me, it just felt like the natural thing to do, right?
right.
Like I saw all of this happening and it was like, where's the framework for people to
Okay.
come together, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Okay, so that'll lead me to first question, because I mean, there's been different iterations, right, that I've seen. And I think the first would have been Quantum Health TV.
Mhm.
That's what I was first introduced to. And I
Yeah.
just, could you tell us a little bit about quantum, I guess what it was? I don't know if it still exists. And what brought you to start that? And was that you? Was that you alone, or was that with Jason?
That was me and Jason. Yeah. My
And
husband. Yeah.
okay.
We've done a lot of this together. So I've been out, out front and out in the field making it all work, but he helps a lot behind the scenes.
Okay, I actually didn't know
Um,
that. I wondered. Yeah.
yeah. And it depends. He has a real job. So it depends how busy he is,
Sure.
but
Right.
especially lately, if we want to talk about the board exam and things like that, he's been extraordinarily helpful. He has what I call science brain, right? And it's interesting to me because I thought, well, everyone who's who's going to come and study this is going to have science brain, but they don't. There's a mix between science brain and intuitive brain. These are terms I made up. These are not real things.
I think I'm going to use these.
It's just me making sense of the world, right? So I see, people come in and they'll be like, okay, so in the electron train transport, when when they get super and they're like way into it. And then there are other people who are like, so how do you help someone understand, right? Like, and they're looking at it from a totally like intuitive, emotional perspective. So I'm more
in
the
the
second
middle.
one. Yeah. And some people are both.
You, Andeea, what would
But
you be?
yeah, what are you?
Yeah,
we're
I
both in the
think
middle.
both in the middle.
Yeah,
somewhere, yeah.
I would agree with that, having worked with both of you. You're both in the middle. I guess my point was Jason has science brain, so
Science brain.
he like vets everything. I'm like, we need to do this, and we need to have this, and there needs to be a community, and there needs to be a directory, and there needs to be a certification, and then he like actually checks that everything makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, so we're a good team.
Yeah. So Quantum Health TV. Tell us
Okay,
about
right.
that.
So we were really like responding to what we felt was missing, right? Like we started out creating what we wished we had, which was a way to understand enough of the science that we felt compelled to act on it. And within this sphere, there is a very, at the time that I came in, like 2017, right? Like there was a clear dominant voice in this
Right.
realm, right? Which is Dr. Jack Kruse,
Kruse.
who I credit with really connecting all the dots. I don't think that we would understand the practical health applications of the work that Kalili and McFadden started, and May Wen Ho, and there's lots and lots and lots of people, right? But
Right.
I don't think we would be focused on the practical health applications of it if it were not for Dr. Kruse. Like that was his insight, is that he could look at all of that science and see, and then talk about what that meant for human biology, because he felt totally unconstrained by, he doesn't care. So he would just come out and say, I think this, right? Like, I think cancer is a mitochondrial dysfunction, and I think it has to do with light. And there's no research and there's no nothing. And most people are too afraid to say something like that because it's going to cost them reputationally or financially, or they're going to feel ridiculed. But he doesn't care. He just says things. And he got a lot of things right early, and I give him so much credit. I really do think he laid the foundation for this field.
And some of that, like a lot of that was based on research studies, that he studied,
yeah, but
that came before, right?
Absolutely, but he made connections that were not in the research. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And many times he would say something in 2015, and by 2017 there would be a paper, right? Like
right.
he sort of saw the whole chessboard, whereas everyone else was looking at their square. And he related it, not just seeing the whole chessboard, but was like, and I think a lot of the Doug Wallace, right? The mitochondrial work that Doug Wallace did to show that most of our diseases are mitochondrial dysfunction and not genetic. So like Dr. Kruse would look at that and then tie it together with all of this other research in ways that I don't think anyone else was doing. I really don't. He laid that out and made it possible.
We should just give backgrounds. There'll be new listeners who have never heard his name. Can you explain what he does for a living? And
so he's a neurosurgeon.
Story?
Yeah, he's a neurosurgeon. He has 2 medical degrees. He has a medical degree, and he's also a dentist.
That's right.
And so he started out as a dentist, and then he became a neurosurgeon, and he's absolutely brilliant. However, because he was so early and his voice is so strong, it really came to be all about him in a certain way, right? Like you had one voice dominating the discourse. And so
do you think it fell on deaf ears because it was just this one voice, you mean? Or?
Well, so there's cascade effects from that, right? Like if you have a movement, even if it's legitimate, if it's connected to one person, the movement is kind of at the mercy of that person. So my, takeaway from trying to connect with this information and learn was that there was enough there for this to be a movement that that was not connected to any specific person, right? Like this is a field of health that could be populated by any number of people. And when there's one dominant voice, there's like a cascade effect of different things, right? Like one of the effects is that person gets positioned in people's minds as a guru. And once you have a guru, like you become a little more hesitant to put your voice out there because it belongs to the guru. If that guru repels people, or there's certain people who don't like him, then they're lost to the movement. They're never going to understand what's going on because it all comes back to this one person.
Right.
So if you dilute that and you just make it about the science and you make it about just coming together to do research, right? Like who owns nutrition, right? Like who owns ketosis, right? Like it's just, these are just things that you get interested in them, you study them. There's many different ways, there's many different people. So from my perspective, it was like, that's what needs to happen with this. It needs to sort of belong to the people, as it were.
Yeah.
So that everyone feels empowered to access it and connect to it.
Wow, beautiful. Because I mean, the irony is that the initiator who eventually becomes the guru, they may not want to own it forever. You know, you would think that they want this information to get out there to change the world. And I think that's happening. That's the exciting part, is that it is.
Yeah, I really
growing.
think it is. I see, I see the phrase quantum biology popping up all over the place on all kinds of podcasts through all different people.
Yeah. People are talking about light, like they've never talked about light before, cold therapy. And, if you listen to a variety of podcasts, some are more functional medicine based. Yeah, I'm hearing it more. So it's the ripple effect is happening. It is exciting. Yeah. So so when we took our course, I was on the first cohort, Andeea was a couple of years later. There was a series that Dr. Jack Cruz did and I don't know if it was you filming or Jason, but I'm guessing were you at the farm, what he called the farm, and was that Destin or Louisiana?
That was in Louisiana. Most of those were in Louisiana. Yeah.
Yeah. I found them really good because he highlighted Jim Al-Khalili especially. And I didn't know any of that, and he was really explaining in his words what quantum biology was. So had you met him before? How was that experience?
So yeah, I interviewed him multiple times over a period of probably 6 to 8 months. We lived in the area for a year. So I have spent some time with him.
Yes.
And so the thing about Jack is that you don't ever want to tell him what you're going to ask him, because he will try to show you why you were wrong to have a plan. He doesn't want to do your plan. Right. So I started out going and being like, all right, so I really want to cover the basics, like for people who aren't familiar. So I'm going to start like that, and like you did with me before we came on here, prepping me and letting me know
you did your homework,
what you wanted from the interview. And what I learned was if I tell him what I wanted, he will refuse to give it. He'll be like, that's stupid, I'm not doing that again, and start talking about something else. So I got to the point with him where I would just come with like one word. I'd be like, redox. He'd be like, okay, fine, it's going to be short. That takes 5 minutes. And then like an hour and a half later, he'd still be talking and I wouldn't have said another word.
But he would have
That's
taught
what
you
it's
so
like
much.
Interviewing Jack. Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So then you have 90 minutes of him on redox. So yeah, those interviews they're archived. Some of them are available in the membership, but not all of them, because that's the other thing, right? It's like, and the reason that we moved from just sort of doing interviews. So the interviews really became the podcast, and the certification came to be because the more we talked to people, the more I interviewed people, the more I would just like troll the internet, finding people who had studied this work and were able to speak to it and understand it and had applied it. And the more I did that, the more I realized that a paradigm isn't enough. You need structured dissemination of the knowledge with parameters around it covering the foundational principles, right? Because if you're following something through like the churn of podcasts, it's like, oh my God, everything's about haplotypes. Oh no, everything's about deuterium. Oh no, everything, and it's
Yeah, I
like
know.
whatever rabbit hole is up for grabs that week. And so you lose sight of like what the actual basics are. So that's what the certification is. It's like, these are the key principles to understand. And then the practical application, we look at it through light, but you can apply the principles really to anything. But it's providing that peace of mind that like, oh, okay, this is what I need to know in order to move forward. And
Right.
there's going to be unlimited, infinite new things to learn at all times, new information, new ways to apply it, all the things. But okay, I have a foundation in place. I feel like I'm grounded in it now, which I
Right.
hope you two feel because you both were star students.
Thank you.
So what came first? Did you do like formulate this applied quantum biology course, or did you form the quantum biology collective first? Like talk a little bit about like how that evolved.
So yeah, it was interviewing people and then the course, and then realizing that it wasn't enough, especially to learn something that's this niche. Like there's really not that many people who understand this. So you need a space for those people to gather and talk and share and ask each other questions and connect and refer
So,
clients to each other and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
so
So
did
that's
that,
the collective.
the quantum biology collective? Okay.
Yeah.
And so can anybody join that, or do they have to have taken the course?
So it's interesting you're asking because we're really in a big change. So maybe I'll just announce all this on your podcast.
It's exciting.
So the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology is in the process of becoming its own entity, which provides the certification. We are in the process of becoming a 501c nonprofit, and the certification and the money that we fundraise as a nonprofit will go towards research in the field of circadian rhythms.
Oh my
And
God.
Nico Kennedy is our new director of research, and she will be overseeing that. So if you have ideas that you would like to play with,
Oh
you
my
can
goodness.
apply to have your research funded.
Okay,
That
we
is
have
so
this.
cool.
We're noticing we have these I'm calling them shiver moments. Andeea, did you get the shiver?
I have the goosebumps, the shivers, all the things are going
Oh,
on.
wow,
So
Meredith.
do I, and I've been doing paperwork on this for weeks, and I still am shivery telling you.
Oh my gosh, this is going to go
Yeah,
back into the research, which we so
yeah,
desperately need. Because
yeah,
we've got, people like Gerald Pollack. My understanding is that his research was or is being shut down, and
yeah,
they don't have the funding. Oh, this is exciting. Wow. Ooh, okay, we're just gonna
yeah.
absorb that thought. Wow, my goodness. Okay. Where do we go from that one?
So
Ooh,
yes, so we could fund work in progress like Gerald Pollack's work, but also we have people within the community who are like, oh, you know what I've always wanted to do, like get a control group who have totally dysregulated circadian rhythm and
yeah,
do a bunch of labs and then circadian optimize them and then do their labs again and then see what the differences are.
right.
Like very simple things that
Well, like
nobody's doing.
Daniel White is coming to mind with his blue
Mhm.
blocker study in Guernsey, England. You know,
Exactly. Very, like,
yeah.
there's a lot of very simple things that could be done. So if people have an idea for that, they can, they can let us know and we can type up a proposal and see if we can fund it. And it would be published through the Institute of Applied Quantum Biology because as I learned just this week, a nonprofit cannot fund an individual. So, and because a nonprofit is considered public funds, then that research would legally need to be made public for everyone to access and learn from.
Wow.
So it could be, yeah, people who are set up, who have labs, yes, but also, even just if you're a practitioner and you have an idea of something you'd like to do, reach out.
That's amazing. Wow, this has grown so much just I mean, I've only been in the space for a few years and it's just growing and this is so inspiring, Meredith. Oh my God.
Like,
I'm so
like you,
excited for you and for what is to come for this paradigm shift. Wow, talk about a needle mover.
yeah, yeah. And, so Andeea and I, if you get a chance to hear our first episode, we talk about our reasons for this podcast. And we talked about just the, wanting to, oh, I'm having a blank moment here. Hang on. Just this idea of changing collective consciousness. So, you've definitely talked about that. Now I've lost my thought. Hang on. It was going to come to me here. Hang on. Because it was powerful. In the meantime, I'm gonna go back to it and I'm gonna ask you another question. What, I guess, prompted the podcast, and the second part of that is how fun has that been?
So the podcast is really fun. It has brought so much joy to my life. And I mean, I was already doing all of these interviews. And I think part of the reason we originally put them behind the paywall was I started doing them in mid 2020. And it just didn't feel safe to put, like you said, the word natural health and YouTube kicked you off. Like it was just a really weird time. And I was like, I just want to keep like a very low profile and just do this for the people who are into it. So I put it behind the Quantum Health TV paywall. And after, time went by and things got going, and I just felt like it would be better just to be a public, to be a to be a podcast and have it be available to the public. I also love interviewing people. It's like my happy place.
You're
I
so
also
good at
don't
it.
really talk about it this much, but I used to interview people for my job when I worked in the media. There was like a 5-minute window where I was like an on-camera person who interviewed, like, did press junkets for Hollywood films.
Well,
So I
it
had a lot
shows
of
though. It shows
training.
in the like your I see the Quantum Biology Collective podcast as one of the most polished, one of the most, yeah, it's a fabulous podcast, and it shows
Oh,
because I
thanks.
think of your interviewing skills, and you're very articulate. Which are you? What was your bachelor? Was it the
English.
arts? It was
Yeah.
English, right? It was
Hmm.
English. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the thought came back to me. I finally figured it out.
Okay.
It's my second Einstein. He's in my head today. For some reason, I'm getting you and Einstein, Meredith. Yeah, which is
Okay.
that's a compliment. But just, the quote, I've used it with clients, and I did mention it in the first podcast, that you can't heal in the same environment that the disease or problem,
Hmm.
was created in. And I think that it's amazing to see the iterations that you've done, starting with your own sickness, Quantum Health TV,
Hmm.
and then it's the Quantum Biology the school, the course, and then it becomes the Quantum Biology Collective, and now the Institute of Quantum Biology. And you are changing an environment for, because again, back to the purpose of this, one of the reasons for the podcast is not just we want to teach people, we want to help people find maybe the one needle mover, for their health. It could be light, it could be cold, who knows. But we have a bigger, there's a bigger aim here, is that we feel like the planet is in a little bit of trouble right now with with the environment, forest fires, real fires going on, things, we know, right? All the toxins.
Hmm.
And so I don't know, I just feel like all this that you've done in helping change this collective consciousness, if we call that the ether, and if you can change that environment, what would happen to the planet?
I would love to know. Yes, I wonder. And I feel like you're articulating, Laura, is like that reality is more flexible than we've been led to believe. And everyone has their threads of genius and experience and wisdom. And it's really just allowing yourself to weave those together. I was on the call today with Nico Kennedy, who's going to be doing our research, and Kathleen Horstmeyer, who helped get us
Yes.
the
A
board
naturopath,
accreditation, right? And
and what would you call
yeah,
these?
she's a naturopath, but she also spent years working in mainstream medicine, accrediting doctors to do vascular screening, right? Like, so she
Okay,
has this
that's right.
weird, like, kind of paperwork, bureaucratic experience that
And
has now become so incredibly
useful.
to quantum biology. And same with Nico, like she went down this, she studied library science and biology and marketing and then became a doula. And now that's all woven together. And Carrie Bennett, I remember the first time I interviewed her, I said to her at the end, I'm like, you are someone who's lived your life by intuition and woven in.
Mhm.
I'm going to study body work. Now I feel now I'm going to do this. And if you look at it through a linear lens, it seems very random, right? Or, I mean, people in recovery, Andeea, like I don't need to tell you that, like, right? Like that's such a beautiful thing about recovery is people using their experience, no matter how terrible it is, to like to make something useful. And I feel like we all have that and we bring it in. And so I had the coaching background. I had quite a lot of experience in education with my children's schools. I was very involved at the board level and strategic planning and like things like that. I had studied a lot of startups, right? Which is just like iterate, pivot, keep what works, iterate, pivot, keep what works. And like all of these different things. And we're all coming together, funneling that wisdom
Yeah.
into a paradigm. So we have some framework around it. We're not all just like blowing in the wind. And it changes reality. And I think if more humans felt the freedom to do that, reality would change differently. And this work attracts people who are doing that because you can't stay on a totally linear path and study applied quantum biology.
Because it's non-linear.
You can't unsee what you learn like through this. It's so powerful. And yeah, we can't get well in the same environment we got sick. And yet this is literally like on the level of healing, not like people in all different realms, right? And I know in recovery it has a double meaning because you can't go back home and into bad relationships or around people who are using back thrive in your recovery, right? But now there's a whole nother layer with the quantum piece, and this just brings another layer to it. We're just like adding on to this. It's so beautiful, so beautiful.
Oh, I'm thankful for actually your past that we didn't know about. It's interesting to hear that you were in strategic planning, and startups, and that's what we're seeing. So a question we had for you that you've probably answered, you've answered it in just in what you've explained so far, and what's actually coming into reality is, how has Meredith grown in this, journey? Because we just, I want to give the background that you interview, like the podcast alone, you're interviewing all these experts. When you're teaching the course, you were on at least first cohort, second cohort that I was on as well. You were in every class. You had all these experts on, doctors, dentists, chiropractors, the gamut of health practitioners. How have you grown in this journey from your perspective?
Well, so many ways. And yeah, just being around that type of knowledge, around those people. We were talking off camera about like having science brain or not
Right.
having science brain, right? Like I don't have science brain, but I think that's what made me the person to not get into the weeds on that, but to provide and build something where the science could live. And that being said, being exposed to all of these brilliant people every day for most days for many years, and it's completely changed my life. So there's the practical changes, which is that like I spend a lot of time outside and I wear blue blockers and my light bulbs are all red and people are like, why? What's going on? But then there's just the growth that happens when you push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Right. And it's like, I have no business doing this. Like, I really don't. I have no credentials. I have no authority.
Imposter syndrome.
I have absolutely no, yes, I have just absolutely no business, like being the executive director of a quantum biology nonprofit. Right. And except that it's like, okay, but there's a lot of strengths that are needed here and I have them. Right. And I will defer to the experts, in the subject matter experts, of which I am not, in the same way that someone who Leeds a university maybe doesn't teach physics, right? Like,
Right.
it's a different strength. And that's sort of like what I was saying before, is that people need to, I would love for people to embrace their strengths, right? Like to see that about themselves. We're so good at being like, oh my God, like, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to talk about science the way Carrie Bennett does. Like, honestly, you're probably not. Like she's got a gift.
For
But
sure.
like but you have gifts. And so find them. And I think doing this was so, I'm gonna, like, to be honest, terrifying. But at the same time, it was like, to get spiritual about it, my higher power was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, here you are, you see all these things that could be happening. You know how to make them happen. So why wouldn't you just do it?
Do it.
And that was a huge growth moment for me. And I hope it helps other people to just do it. Just do their thing. Do your thing.
A couple things on that. Something people may not know about the Quantum Biology Collective is that you've added I think it's Mondays at noon, you have like a weekly meditation. And it's interesting that you brought that in. And, because
Yeah, that was Peter Bort. He was like, listen, we need
he's
to
beautiful.
meditate. And I was like, okay. And yes, because it does. So continue. I wanted to give him his
Well,
credit.
it's back to that change the environment that you're living in, right? Changing what's going on in that head, but also, when you're in that space, sometimes we get downloads. So it's, I feel like, Meredith, the question is, are you getting downloaded? Like to see where you've gone with this and the growth is just amazing.
For sure. This is not me. And the whole, every time I did something, it's like, the business people are like, what's the plan? What's the 5-year plan? I'm like, I don't know. Right. Like, it's like, I'm going to try this. It's an experiment. We'll see what works. We'll see what helps people. And then we'll build on it from there. And so, I necessarily have to stay out of the weeds. I'm not on every call anymore because
Right.
I do need a certain, which is another growth, a certain amount of distance. And that's another growth moment too, that I think most people go through. It's like, you need to be in the weeds for a while, and then you need to know when to pull back to be able to see that bigger picture and be like, okay, let's go in this direction. Let's go in that direction. But yeah, it's no longer my idea. Right. And so I kind of like had a chat, just, maybe 6 months ago, was like, it finally felt stabilized. I know it's been on offer for a long time, but behind the scenes, it's always like, well, how's this going to work? And what are we going to do? And it finally sort of got to a place where it felt stable. And I was like, okay, QBC, okay, Institute of Applied Quantum Biology, like, who are you? What do you want to be? And it was like, and it just was, it's like, it's not a business. It doesn't want to scale. It wants to be a school, and schools are a nonprofit. So it told me, and I obeyed.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, we had so many questions for you that you actually answered. It's interesting because one of them was, what prompted the accreditation of the American, and can you maybe explain that to the listeners? What's happening with the course itself, the applied quantum biology course, and how it's now transitioning to this accreditation now. It's still the course, but then there's this option to do this accreditation with the American Naturopathic Medical Certification Board.
So I'll just take it a step back. I did a really interesting interview, which I have not published yet, and I'm going to put it out for members, with the president of the American Naturopathic Medical Association. And he did a beautiful job, like, explaining the difference between a certification and a license, right? And a certification, I mean, really anyone can create a certification, right? And it's a way of saying, like, we have certain standards, we have certain criteria, we have certain expectations that need to be met in order for you to receive this piece of paper that says you are certified in this material or this approach or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. A licensing board has the power to decide whether you can work or not, right? Like, it's a different beast. So the medical world, the legal world, and it has its place, and it is very important. However, it also gives a certain amount of control over people, in that if you go outside of their parameters, they can revoke your license.
Right.
So a certification is really just an assurance that the person has fulfilled a certain type of work. The accreditation then is at the next level. So a person comes to us and takes the certification, and we say, yes, you have provided enough
Right.
evidence and done enough work to show that you understand this material. Here's your certification. Then the accreditation is that we then take our course to a different body or a different governing organization. They do an audit of what we offer, and then they say, okay, yes, we approve you we will include you as an organization that we say can give accreditation. And that's the American Naturopathic Association.
Right.
So people can take our course and get continuing education credit with them. Then we took it a step further and did a new application where they did a different audit that was more in depth and approved our material to have a board exam. So you can now become board certified. So the board certification is not through us. We had to apply and get approved, but the exam itself is administered through the ANMA. I can't say it. There's too many words. Through the ANMA. So once you have our certification, you can go to them and take the exam, which will be ready probably by the end of the month. And then you are board certified in applied quantum biology by the ANMA.
And then you have to, in the next year, every year, I guess, have to take so many.
So we convince them to make it every 2 years.
2 years?
That so people have some breathing room, but yes. And then every 2 years, you need to complete a certain number of continuing education credits to maintain CEUs, to maintain your board certification.
Yeah. Okay. And then there'll be people in my situation where they're not American, they're in different countries that might be listening. What is there another advantage to that? Like, for example, if I coach somebody, just as an applied quantum biology coach, I may not have any insurance. People won't have insurance for that. It has to fall under my holistic nutrition, or it has to fall and in my field, holistic nutrition, we aren't really well covered. Is there any help? Do you think does that help at all to get coverage? Or do you think we'll ever see that day?
So I would tell people to defer to their original training and think of this as continuing education, and to be careful not to go outside the parameters if they are licensed or certified, to check that they are operating within those parameters so that they don't put anything in jeopardy that they've already done. We've had people take this who don't even put it. They just want to learn the information and they don't even put the certification on there. They don't list it as a credential because they feel like it might interfere because they have a very, they're in the medical field or something where they feel like it won't add to and might detract from or put in jeopardy what they've already been doing. So that has to, I would say, be the responsibility of each practitioner to make sure that you're staying within your parameters in what you do. And I can't speak to everything, but I do, the insurance thing, you would have to suss that out on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
But I don't really see there being a specific umbrella for this. I think it would fall under energy work, right? So one of the lawyers that I work with, she does compliance for energy workers. And she's like, well, I just told her what we do. She's like, it's close enough. It'll all apply. So, yeah.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that would make sense. Do you have any more questions, Andeea? Oh, I have one that comes right away. Okay, go for it. Okay.
Oh, go.
Yeah. So obviously this started with your own health journey, Meredith, and you've learned from so many people. What has your health benefit, and how, if it did?
Yes, so much. That's why I got excited about this, because, I think sometimes people hear, like light really matters. And they're like, oh, they're saying it's only about light. I'm like, no, we're not. Like, there's everything has its place. But I had come to a point in my journey with chronic fatigue where I had covered all of the major bases, and understanding light was really, for me, the missing piece. So for someone else, if they start with light, that might just be their foundation and they move on to, trauma work or whatever it is. Whereas I had done all the things for many, many years. So for me, it was truly the missing piece. And
So all the things, meaning mainstream medicine, and
yeah, I
then
did all the lab. I
functional.
mean, mainstream medicine had nothing to offer me. Like I wasn't sick enough. So
It wasn't
there was,
recognized.
it was like, your labs are fine. Like you're just tired, right? It was
Right.
only the acupuncturists and the naturopaths and the nutritionists who acknowledged that just because my labs were okay doesn't mean I was fine, because it wasn't. So I did in specifically for the chronic fatigue, I did lots of food stuff, lots of supplements, lots of acupuncture, that kind of thing. And then previous to that, just for other reasons, I had done like extensive, deep healing work in many different capacities. So
More energy work, would you say?
energy work, therapy,
Therapy. Yeah.
yeah, lots of stuff like that. And yeah, and healing work energy work in terms of you can go see an energy healer, but also energy work in terms of like doing deep dive audits of your own life and your own
Introspection.
your past, and coming to terms with all of the things, right? Which is something that comes up a lot, because if that's something you haven't done yet, then optimizing your light environment is a beautiful foundation, but you're still probably going to need to do that type of work.
So true. And for some of the listeners out there, they know that Andeea and I both have dogs. Well, I don't. I had a dog, but I now board dogs. Apparently, you have a dog journey as well. Can you link that back to light for us?
Yes. So we had a little doggie, and she reached the end of her time. And where we live here, we chose to live, we live right next to the forest preserve in our town, and where the house is like set back off the road. And it was for me to go on all my nature walks and my UV walks and all the walks. However, I was spending all my time on my laptop, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I'll just do one more thing and then I'll go for a walk. So I got a new dog who is the sweetest, most wonderful thing. My children tease me every day. They're like, you said we were going to get another dog, and now we have this puppy and you love her. You said no more dogs. I'm like, I did. I was wrong. And I'm out there with her all the time going on my walks. So she's my light puppy.
It helps so much. Yeah.
It really does. And people think I'm joking when I'm like, just get a dog, but I'm really not. Like, they have to go outside and you have to take them. So
and even if it's just to throw a ball, helps that quantum sampling the sun throughout the day, not just the major walks. A lot of times they need to pee. And that's just, they're quantum sampled
and
the
it's
sun
like,
again.
oh, right. I'll walk outside for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's the other thing I'll say too. If someone's just starting out with all this, like it was years building up these habits.
Right.
When I first heard about this, I was like, what? All right, maybe I'd like open a window now and then.
Yeah.
That's a good point to make. Yeah.
Yeah.
All these things, just so people who listening that aren't overwhelmed, these things do take time, and little bit by little bit, we add and we compound our health by adding these little tiny shifts, and every single little bit counts. Every time you go outside, and even if it's just for 5 minutes, it counts. And go ahead.
Oh, this just came to me. So we've been interviewing people, and we know of Kelly Bento. We have to invite her on, and she's known as the quantum mom, as you well know. And I was going to ask you about how your kids have benefited, but I know the dog is definitely benefiting, and I'm sure the kids are benefiting. But so we're going to include you in that category of the quantum mom category, Meredith. But honestly, it's just kind of coming to me now that you're our quantum mom in starting so many things, in that sense. So thank you. The journeys that
Thank you
we've had.
both.
Yeah, so grateful for bringing everybody together. You're a super connector for sure, Meredith, and you continue to make all the connections, and we're just so grateful for you. And yeah,
And we call you the quantum matchmaker in our first episode. Yeah.
The quantum matchmaker. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love that. I feel good about that.
So we'll just maybe
Matchmaker.
end. Yeah, we'll just end here with one question we've been asking, and we're just kind of trying this out and seeing how it goes. But what does it mean to you to be quantum healthy? What does that bring up?
I think it's just having the understanding that everything is affecting us all the time, whether it's the thought in our head, the persons that we're talking to, the environment that we're living in, and the fact that we can't see it doesn't matter. Even the invisible things are affecting our health. And so just to know that and like choose accordingly when possible. And then I also like to say, however important you think light is, times it by a million.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Love that
Oh.
answer.
What an honor to have you on, Meredith.
Oh, you guys, thank you.
Oh,
Thanks
it
for
is.
having me. You're
Yes.
wonderful, wonderful people. I'm so excited. And you came and learned all this stuff and made presentations and took it out into the world and just went for it. And you're causing ripples and waves across the universe, the two of you. So
Oh, thank you.
you.
All right, everybody. We will see you next time on Quantum Healthy Podcast.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy Podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakissmannwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.